All right, everybody. Thank you for coming back to my YouTube page. A couple days ago, there was an article that came out in The Atlantic called A Ticking Clock on American Freedom. It's later than you think, but not too late, by Adrian LaFrance. Um, and it's talking about how we're almost out of time before Trump's authoritarianism takes hold and that he effectively becomes a dictator in the United States of America. And I'm going to read from some of this article, but I'm going to discuss a lot of it too. And she conducted a couple of really good interviews in this article as well. So if you like this video, please click like, leave a comment, please subscribe to my page. It's free. This is kind of what I do on my page. I've started doing these longer videos, just focusing on a single topic or a single article that I think is much more deserving of a 3 minute or less video. And certainly the subject of authoritarianism and Donald Trump in the United States of America is deserving of that kind of time and attention. So I'm going to read her opening paragraph here. Look around you, take stock of where you are, and know this. Today, right now, and I mean this second, you have the most power you will ever have in the current fight against authoritarianism in America. If this sounds dramatic to you, it should. Over the past 5 months, in many hours of conversations with multiple people who have lived under dictators and autocrats that the author conducted, one message came through loud and clear. America, you are running out of time. I'll say initially, this is not how I envisioned spending my mid 50s. I'm 56 years old. I was born in 1968. I grew up in the 70s. I was a teenager in the 80s and was in college and law school in the 90s. I never ever thought that what we are experiencing right now would ever happen in this country. And I think something that the author talks about in this article is kind of this concept of a failure of imagination. But we'll get to that more in a minute. And one of the people that the author interviewed is a woman named Maria Ressa. She's Filipina, and she wrote a book that's next up on my reading list. She's former winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, and the book is simply called How to Stand Up to a Dictator. And it's about her experience in the Philippines when President Duterte was elected, and she was operating an independent news reporting organization. And so I'm very much looking forward to this and the things that she experienced under President Duterte until he eventually had her arrested and tried to shut down her website. Duterte is no longer president of the Philippines. He is in prison at The Hague. So it can happen. Yeah. Think about that. Think about how amazing it would be to wake up one day and be able to say, Donald Trump is in prison at The Hague. I would very much enjoy being able to say that and have it be a factually correct statement. But her message to the author was, authoritarian leaders topple democracy faster than you can imagine. If you wait to speak out against them, you have already lost. And so, following the election, the author of this article, Adrian LaFrance, again, it's at the Atlantic, and anybody who's followed me for any amount of time knows that I highly, highly, highly recommend subscribing to the Atlantic, subscribing to Talking Points Memo, and subscribing to the Bulwark. I think those three websites, for me anyway, are going to be of critical importance over the next 3 years and 8 months. We're in week 15. We're almost 4 months in. But so the author contacted Maria Ressa following the election and was like, what should or how should Americans prepare for for Trump's return. And Ms. Ressa told her then that she was worried about a failure of imagination. Bingo. She knew that the speed of the deconstruction, of the destruction of institutions would surprise people here, even those paying close attention. Ressa splits her time between Manila and the Philippines and New York. And she repeatedly warned the author to be ready for everything to happen very quickly. And when they spoke a few weeks after his inauguration, Ressa was shaken. President Trump was moving faster than even she had anticipated. And that is something, I mean, I made a lot of videos leading up to the election and following the election before inauguration. And I made this kind of exact point that it's like the fact that he won the first time in 2016 was a failure of imagination. It was something that we couldn't really wrap our heads around. Sorry, I'm glancing off to the side because I thought my face was out of focus. Nobody in their right mind imagined that Donald Trump could become president of the United States. We couldn't imagine that. And then it was real. And then it happened. And now he's back for a second term. He wants revenge. He wants retribution. He's going to inflict pain on groups and people and organizations and entities that he's got beef with. And the thing that I thought that it would have taken us at least a year, if not 18 months, to get to the point where we are right now. And that's because he and the people around him had 4 years to get ready. They had 4 years to plan. Because he lost 2020 election, they had 4 years to plan. And I never expected that it was going to happen this quickly. And again from the article, the chorus of people who have lived through democratic ruin will all tell you the same thing. Do not make the mistake of assuming you still have time. You think you can wait and see and keep democracy intact? Want to bet? Like people who have been around this, people who have been through this in other countries, are screaming at the top of their lungs to the people who live in this country. And they're like, you guys are almost out of time. The Trump administration's breakneck pace is obviously no accident. While citizens are busy processing their shock over one shattered norm or disregarded law, Trump is already on to the next one. This is the playbook authoritarians have used all over the world. First, the leader removes those with expertise and independent thinking from the government and replaces them with toadies who are arrogant, ignorant, and extremely loyal. Next, he takes steps to centralize his power and claim unprecedented authority. Along the way, he conducts an all-out assault on the truth so that the truth tellers are distrusted, corruption becomes the norm, and questioning him becomes impossible. The Constitution bends and then finally breaks. This is what tyrants do, and Trump is doing it now to the United States. If you look at Duterte in the Philippines, it took 6 to 9 months for him to start, destroying the federal agencies. And if you look at Hungary, it took Viktor Orban several years because he did it slowly. And Putin did it slowly and deliberately in Russia. And Ms. Ressa said, the death of democracy happens by 1,000 cuts. And you don't realize how bad you're bleeding until it's already too late. And it's going to get worse because it's working. The things that Trump is doing are working. The courts are doing their best to stand up to him. He's blatantly violating orders from the lower courts. He's more or less violating an order from the Supreme Court, effectively violating it. He just hasn't said so explicitly. And I'm wondering how long it's going to take for us to get to that point where he's just like, no, I'm not going to obey the Supreme Court. I'm not going to obey the federal courts at all. And, but again, it's like, as distasteful as this stuff is, And as depressing as it is to talk about, I think it's really important that we do, because I think it's really important that we have a clear view and a clear vision and understanding of what he's doing, and where we are right now and where it's heading. And where we're heading right now is him being a dictator in the United States. I mean, he just issued some, I'm going to do a separate video on this. He just issued some bullshit executive order today that, you know, it's pretext, something about law enforcement. It's pretext for invoking the Insurrection Act in the United States and deploying military forces on American soil. And he's laying the groundwork. He's telling us ahead of time exactly what he's going to do. He did that all through the campaign, except when he was denying Project 2025. He told us everything else he was going to do. And he got into office and he has started doing it. And there's no mystery when it comes to that stuff. And yeah, which brings me to this section of the article. These are not uncertain times, not really. The trick of aspiring dictators is they tell you exactly what they are going to do ahead of time. An authoritarian repeats lies, yes, but he also repeats outrageous truths until they no longer sound outrageous, at least to some. Tell people again and again that you're going to imprison political enemies, journalists, or otherwise take away basic freedoms, and the public becomes primed to accept the attack when it finally happens. The role, and what better aid in that than social media, and going back to some of the things that Maria Ressa talks about in her book. She describes how in 2017, President Duterte, I think he came into office in 2016, his propagandists used social media to make a hashtag go viral, hashtag arrest Maria Ressa. And even though it was 2 years before he finally did arrest her, that hashtag and that idea had been out there for so long that when he finally did arrest her, nobody was surprised by it, because everybody had just been primed to expect that was going to happen. And months before Duterte was elected in 2016, Ms. Ressa interviewed Duterte for the news organization that she had co-founded in the Philippines. And Duterte took aim at his own government, just like Trump has done. I will stop corruption. I will stop criminality. I will fix government. When I said I'll stop criminality, I will stop criminality. And if I have to kill you, I will kill you personally. And what people don't remember is that, within hours of him being inaugurated, they started doing that. He cracked down on crime and drugs, and anyone who was suspected of being a drug dealer was just killed in the street. And under his leadership, there were tens of thousands of Filipinos who were just murdered. And that's why he's sitting in a jail cell in The Hague. And Trump, is already floating the idea of shipping American citizens to this CECOT prison in El Salvador. And President Bukele is all over that. And yeah. And, it's about just continually just moving the window and moving the window and moving the window and moving the window. And it goes back to, in the first campaign when Trump was like, I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and I wouldn't lose any supporters. And more recently, with zero context, he tweeted, "He who saves his country does not violate any law," which that's dictator shit, man. That's dictator stuff right there. And, the one thing that Trump has not done yet is engage in violence on the streets of the United States. But then he issued that executive order today, priming us for violence on the streets of this country. And again, it's like when I was making videos right before and following the election, before he was re-inaugurated, I was like, we need to use our imaginations to imagine the worst possible things that we can come up with for him. And then expect that the things he actually does are going to be worse than that. And even going through that exercise myself, my imagination failed. He's gone way further, way faster than I ever in a million years would have imagined that he would. But Ms. Ressa has some advice for Americans. If you're in a leadership position, you must demonstrate that you understand the seriousness of the situation and that you're there to protect the people who are depending on you. But also, you have to know that not everyone is brave. Not everyone is ready to stand up for their freedom. There are those who are fearful, who are easily manipulated, and can put others at risk. When the stakes are high, she advises, there's no time for weakness. Capitulation is contagious, as we've seen among the business class and the donor class and these law firms and some colleges. But her main point is that courage is also contagious on a grand scale. So eventually, Duterte, her book is called How to Stand Up to a Dictator, The Fight for Our Future. So I'm very, very, very much looking forward to reading this. I'll after I do, I'll make a video about that and let you guys know if it's any good. So, she's been a journalist forever, and she won a Nobel Peace Prize. So I'm guessing she knows how to write. I'm looking forward to seeing that. But her news agency in the Philippines was called Rappler, Rappler. Duterte tried to shut it down a bunch of times. And so she and the people that she worked with, they started making plans for how they could get to a different country and get the website back up online if Duterte shut it down in the Philippines. And they also started making plans just for their physical safety. And she said, we knew that our journalists might be framed for crimes, and we warned them about that. We reminded them that if any altercation took place with the government, the first thing they should do is pick up their phone and start live broadcasting what was happening. They did drills so that going live would be like muscle memory for them. And a bunch of them had to do that on occasion. Because if you're going live and you've got your camera, it's not like you're recording it and saving it to your phone. You're broadcasting. And I know with TikTok and with YouTube, if you go live on TikTok or on YouTube, it saves that website saves that video, and then you can repost it later on. So, but even with her expectations and her imagination, Ms. Ressa said, I always knew that Duterte would come after the press. He told us he would, but I failed to imagine the worst of it. I never thought that I would actually be arrested, and I was wrong. So she was eventually arrested on Valentine's Day 2019, charged with cyber libel over a story published before a cyber libel law had even taken effect. In a little over a year, Duterte's government filed 10 arrest warrants against her with a cumulative maximum prison sentence of 103 years. Nearly a decade later, she's beaten 8 of those arrest warrants. But think about that. Cyber libel. That's what Duterte did in the Philippines. Trump and the Project 2025 guys and a bunch of people in his administration, they want to reverse a Supreme Court decision in this country called New York Times v. Sullivan, which is a libel law. It's a defamation opinion. And so essentially, it's like for normal everyday people, if somebody defames you, you have to prove that that person made a statement about you that was false, that they made that statement to other people, that you were harmed by that statement, that you incurred actual damages. There was damage to your reputation from that. And then you can sue that person for defamation. What the New York Times v. Sullivan case determined, and it mainly applies to news organizations, is that if it's a person of notoriety, like a person who is known to people, someone who has put themselves out there to, somebody who has run for office, or someone who, is a business leader or a celebrity or something like that, you have to prove. And let's say the New York Times writes a story that person doesn't like, and sues the New York Times for defamation. That person has to meet all those other criteria. And then under New York Times versus Sullivan, they also have to prove actual malice, meaning that the New York Times or whatever news organization knew that they were publishing false information and did that on purpose in order to harm that person. And otherwise, news organizations wouldn't be able to report on almost anybody, because they could just get sued for defamation. Anytime somebody wrote a story about somebody that the person who's the subject of that story didn't like. So Trump and his people want New York Times v. Sullivan to be overturned. And they're trying to get the Supreme Court to do that now, so that Donald Trump can sue any news organization who writes any story about him. And put them through protracted and very expensive legal battles. And so that's something that's happening right now, that we need to keep an eye on. So towards the end of the article, I'm going to read a couple things, because they do try to end it on a high note. Dangerous times call for high levels of both calm and courage. You need to assume the worst is going to happen and work backwards from there. Strength in numbers is real. You need to create a community around you. Remember that facts still matter. Every individual who speaks out, every person who calls a lie, demonstrates fealty to the truth. Do not assume that your voice does not matter. It does. You also choose truth by what you read, how you choose to spend your time. If people no longer care about reality, authoritarians learn that they can do whatever they want. Put it another way. If you lose reality, you lose the rule of law, you lose democracy, you are no longer free. All you can do is hold the line. Hold the line to the standards of your industry's ethics. Hold the line to what the Constitution says. The minute you step back or voluntarily give up freedom, it is gone for good. So, I made a video last week where I was like, I really remember like a year ago when Biden was president, the campaign was going on, that I laughed a lot more in my videos. I made more jokes in my videos. My videos were a lot more fun. And we're not there anymore, guys. We are running out of time. Trump's authoritarianism is taking hold. And I'm concerned. I'm very, very concerned about where this is going. So I'm going to read this book about how to stand up to a dictator. And I'm going to start trying to learn everything that I can about what we can do as individual citizens, individually and collectively, to fight against this in a way that's effective, that doesn't result with all of us getting arrested and sent to prison. So, and I'm going to try to focus a bunch of my content on that moving forward. Again, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please click like, leave a comment, subscribe to my page. It's free. And if you have any questions, please put them in the comments, and I'll do future videos and try to answer some of those. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody.